at ESPN 105.9. The Zone.
Good morning. Welcome in. We are the Out of Bounds Show. ESPN 105.9 The Zone. WRKS. We'll be live from Memphis in May tomorrow. Looking forward to that. Hanging out with award-winning pitmaster Jeff Hollywood Jones. JonesyQ.com. That's JonesYQ.com. Live in the Bank Plus studio. We're streaming live on the Out of Bounds radio app. Recapping on some topics today that we're hitting on. We'll have Brian Davis stop by, Texas Longhorns insider, to discuss Steve Sarkisian, new head coach for the Texas Longhorns. Brian Davis, Hook'em.com. And I'm looking forward to that interview with Brian Davis. Farm Bureau Insurance call-in line is 601-707-3750. Show is brought to you by the Filet at Kessler Prime. Visit KesslerPrime.com to make a reservation. We're going to go to the Modelo guest line. Welcome in Dr. Larry Field. Hey, Dr. Field, how are you?
Doing great.
Good. Shoulder and elbow specialist with Mississippi Sports Medicine and Orthopedic Center. And Dr. Field, we had some terrible news come out of Oxford yesterday. Gunnar Hoagland, one of their ace pitchers, tore his UCL and will have, I guess, Tommy John surgery, and he will be out, obviously, for the rest of the year. And we thought we would bring you on and you could kind of walk us through it. I would like to start with this. How does this injury occur, Dr. Field?
Yeah, well, it's a great question, and Bo, thanks for the opportunity. The reality is that, the demands on the elbow are tremendous in these overhead throwers. Baseball is basically a non-physiologic activity, kind of like not normal activity, and it puts a lot of stresses on that elbow. And these guys, especially high-level throwers like Mr. Hoagland, have just tremendous forces generated with these throws, and they throw a bunch, of course. And it just overwhelms sometimes that ligamentous restraint on the inside of the elbow and causes it to tear.
Dr. Larry Field on the Out of Bounds show discussing the an injury like the one that Gunnar Hoagland, Ole Miss pitcher, had at some point, I guess, over the weekend, and he will be out for the year for Ole Miss. What is, when you're talking surgery, rehab, and getting back 100%, what's the estimated timetable?
Yeah, it's a long process, and the main reason it's such a long process is because, again, the demands on that reconstructed ligament are dramatic. And so the ligament has to be healed, it has to be incorporated, it has to be able to resist those stresses. And so that takes a long time for the body to do. And so consequently, it takes, about a year, maybe a little less, to get back to that level of performance that the pitcher was throwing at before he sustained the injury.
And I know each individual is different, but as far as – so I guess you rehab, and then you start to throw. But before you get on the mound and let it rip, so to speak, again, that just varies per individual, right, Dr. Phil?
It does. There is some variability, and you kind of tailor that to how well the patient's doing postoperatively. Some patients do particularly well, and you can be a little more advanced with your progressive activities. But I think probably at the minimum, a thrower like this who has a formal reconstruction with a graft would be at least 6 months before significant demands are placed on that ligament from throwing, whether it be on the mound or not.
Okay. Dr. Larry Field, Mississippi Sports Medicine and Orthopedic Center, shoulder and elbow specialist, joining us on the Out of Bounds show. How common is this injury today?
Yeah, unfortunately, it's really an epidemic of these Tommy John type ligament injuries. I think it's a consequence of just how popular throwing is, how strong these young athletes are, and how much they throw compared to, for example, when I played baseball 40 years ago. It's really a whole different animal. And so it's unfortunately very common. Sometimes the ligament injuries are less severe than the one that Mr. Hogan apparently sustained, but the reality is they're common. We have to manage them quite often in trying to help these kids continue to participate in the sport that they love.
Just had a listener text us, if the surgery goes well and you have an individual that quote unquote is a great worker and dives into rehab like they're supposed to, when do they even start like soft toss?
You know, it depends, again, on the particulars of the operation and the injury. Sometimes we can use supplemental devices in addition or instead of the ligament reconstruction that allows us to start the process sooner. And I just don't know the exact particulars of his type of injury, but I would assume that he probably has a complete tear and will need a graft. And if we assume that, then I think it'd probably be 3 or 4 months before he puts a ball in his hand at least, and then that process subsequently progresses over 6 months or so.
Okay.
So it's a long haul. But you know, in a young athlete like this with a tremendous potential future, I think we want to do everything correctly. We have the opportunity, the timetable here to accomplish it, and so I feel sure that his trainers and the surgeons will do exactly that.
Dr. Larry Field, Mississippi Sports Medicine and Orthopedic Center. He joins us on the Out of Bounds show and the Modelo guest line talking UCL injuries, Tommy John surgery, and we see that in baseball basically on a day-to-day basis. What does it say about sports medicine that, one, with all these players coming back and sometimes better than ever, but a JT Ginn had a similar injury last year, and yet was still a second-round pick by the New York Mets in Major League Baseball. What does that say about sports medicine today, Dr. Field?
Well, it's a great question. I mean, I think, to be honest, I think that it represents how far we've come to be able to even accomplish a procedure and a rehabilitation protocol that allows these athletes to throw at this level. I think it's a testament to the value of the techniques that have been developed, but at the same time, it's a recognition of the limitations that we currently have. You know, even though these athletes do sometimes come back better than they were, probably because they were having symptoms before the reconstruction anyway, it does show you that there's a limit to what we can currently do, at least from a statistical standpoint, to get all of these athletes back. And I would suggest, in the literature that we have, that while it's statistically likely that Mr. Hogan will get back and play in the major leagues and hopefully have a long and wonderful career, there is some concern over the longevity of his career, and hopefully he'll be able to weather that.
One more question. We've got a minute here. Another listener just texted in. We're visiting with Dr. Larry Field, shoulder and elbow specialist with Mississippi Sports Medicine and Orthopedic Center. How long does the typical UCL Tommy John surgery take?
Oh, it takes about 45 minutes. It's not a particularly complicated operation, but we try to take time because the technique this particular operation is especially critical, and so it takes less than an hour typically.
Okay, Dr. Larry Field, Mississippi Sports Medicine and Orthopedic Center, shoulder and elbow specialist, joining us on the Out of Bounds show. Dr. Field, thanks for jumping on such short notice. We appreciate it.
Happy to do it, Bo. Thanks.
Take care. Dr. Larry Field on the Out of Bounds show, walking us through a UCL tear, Tommy John surgery, and what it looks like today compared to 20, 30 years ago. And the first guy that I think of, Blake, is John Smoltz. I know that there were others, but the fact that Smoltz had Tommy John surgery and then was able to come back and, quite frankly, be awesome at the Major League Baseball level, I think that blew all of us away, but I know there were some others along the way. We're live in the Bank Plus studio. The Out of Bounds Show, 105.9 The Zone, ESPN. Back in a second.